The stars had always called to humanity, and in the year 2247, they finally answered back. It began on a Tuesday morning when 17,000 alarms screamed across every space monitoring station on Earth, the Moon, and Mars. Something massive had just entered the solar system, and it was not alone. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo was drinking her third cup of coffee when her assistant burst through the door with a face as white as paper. And the words that came out of his mouth changed everything humanity thought it knew about the universe. 500 ships just appeared near Jupiter, and they are heading straight for Earth. Within hours, the entire world watched their screens as the impossible became real. A massive armada of alien vessels moved through space with a grace and power that made humanity's proudest ships look like children's toys floating in a bathtub. The ships were beautiful in a terrifying way, each one covered in strange symbols that glowed with soft blue light. And the largest vessel at the center of the formation was bigger than some of Earth's moons. Amara stood in the newly built Stellar Contact chamber beneath the United Nations building in Geneva, surrounded by screens showing the approaching fleet and the frightened faces of world leaders joining from every corner of the planet. "We always wondered if we were alone," she said quietly to her advisors. "And now we have our answer." The first transmission came exactly 6 hours after the fleet's arrival, broadcast on every frequency humanity used, and some they did not even know existed. A face appeared on every screen on Earth. And it was not human. High Arbiter Vel Crix of the Fashion Dominion had gray skin that seemed to shift like smoke, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and a mouthful of teeth that looked like they were made of black glass when he spoke. His voice was translated perfectly into every human language at once, a demonstration of technology so advanced it made Earth's best scientists weep with frustration. "Primitive species of the third planet. I am High Arbiter Vel Crix, voice of the Galactic Council, speaker for 4,000 civilizations, and keeper of the sacred laws that govern all sentient life in this galaxy." He paused, and all 4 of his eyes blinked slowly in a way that somehow conveyed absolute boredom. "You have committed 3 violations of galactic law: unauthorized development of faster-than-light travel, failure to petition the Council for existence rights before achieving spacefaring status, and illegal occupation of strategically valuable star system." Without proper authorization, Amara felt her hands tighten into fists as she listened, but her face remained calm. She had spent 30 years in politics, and she knew how to hide her emotions when it mattered most. The punishment for these crimes is well established, Vel Crix continued, and it has been applied to 612 species before you. Earth will surrender unconditionally to the Galactic Council within 7 of your planetary rotations. The list of demands appeared on every screen: complete dismantling of all military forces, surrender of all spacecraft, acceptance of Council oversight in all governmental matters, and integration into the galactic community as a protected servitor species. The last term made Amara's blood run cold because she understood exactly what it meant. Humanity would become slaves in everything but name. "This is not a negotiation," Vel Crix said, and something like amusement flickered across his alien features. "Because young species do not negotiate with the Council. Young species submit, accept their place in the natural order, and learn to be grateful for the protection they receive." He leaned forward, and his 4 eyes seemed to look directly at Amara, even though she knew that was impossible. Every species in galactic history has made this choice when faced with our power, and every species has chosen wisely. I trust you will do the same." The transmission ended, and for a long moment, there was only silence in the contact chamber. Then the shouting began. World leaders screamed at each other across video screens. Military commanders demanded immediate action. Religious figures called for prayer, and somewhere in the background, Amara could hear the sound of billions of humans panicking. As the news spread across the planet, she let them shout for exactly 3 minutes before she raised her hand. "Enough," she said. And her voice was not loud, but something in it made everyone fall silent. "I need to speak with the Arbiter again. Please establish a connection." Her advisors looked at her like she had lost her mind. But they did as she asked, and within moments, Valkrik's face appeared on the main screen once more. "You wish to surrender already?" he asked, and he sounded almost disappointed. That was faster than usual. "Most species take at least a day to accept the inevitable. I wish to request a brief recess," Amara said calmly, "to consult with my people before we give our official response." Valkrik's S4 eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. "A recess? How charmingly formal." "Very well, little creature. Take your 7 days and consult with your people. Though I cannot imagine what there is to discuss." The transmission ended again, and Amara turned to face the room full of frightened, angry, confused faces. Everyone out except Admiral Chan, Director Asai, and Dr. Yamamoto, she said. "And someone please make sure this room is secure from any listening devices, human or otherwise," when the room was empty, except for her 3 most trusted advisors. Amara did something that shocked all of them. She smiled, not a nervous smile or a brave smile or even a sad smile, but a genuine, warm smile that reached all the way to her eyes. "They have no idea," she said quietly, "what they have just started." Admiral Chung Wei-Lin, commander of the United Earth Defense Force, stepped forward with a question on his weathered face. "Madam Secretary, with respect, we are facing 500 ships with technology centuries beyond our own." "What exactly do you mean?" Amara walked to a wall panel and pressed her palm against a hidden scanner, and a section of the wall slid away to reveal a room that none of them had known existed. Inside were files. Thousands of files, some digital and some printed on actual paper for security, all bearing the same classification stamp. "Project Last Light. 30 years ago, when I was just a junior diplomat, the world's governments made a secret agreement," Amara said, as she pulled out one of the older files. "Because we knew that first contact might not be friendly, and we knew that humanity needed to be ready." She handed the file to Admiral Chun, and his eyes went wide as he read the contents. Hidden shipyards on the far side of the moon. Weapons platforms disguised as mining stations in the asteroid belt. Research facilities buried so deep under mountains that no satellite could ever find them. "We have been preparing for this moment for 3 decades, Amara said. "And while our technology may not match theirs, we have something they clearly do not expect." "What is that?" Dr. Yamamoto asked. Amara looked at the screen where Valkrik's arrogant face had appeared just moments before, and her smile grew wider. "The will to fight," she said. "And 30 years of learning how to be creative about it." She turned to her team with fire in her eyes. "They expect us to surrender because every other species did. They expect us to bow because bowing is easier than bleeding. But they made one terrible mistake in their calculations. They forgot to ask what humans do when someone tells us we cannot win." Admiral Chun slowly began to smile as understanding dawned on his face. "We fight anyway," he said. "We fight anyway." Amara agreed, and God help anyone who stands in our way. Outside the contact chamber, the world was in chaos, but inside that small room, 4 humans began to plan something that the galaxy had never seen before: resistance against the inevitable. And somewhere in orbit, High Arbiter Valkrix reported to his superiors that Earth would surrender within the week because that was what always happened. He could not have been more wrong. The 7 days passed faster than anyone expected, and while the rest of the world held its breath in fear, something remarkable happened behind closed doors. Every government on Earth stopped fighting with each other for the first time in human history. There were no political games, no territorial disputes, no arguments about resources or religion or ancient grudges. There was only one question that mattered, and every human being answered it the same way: will we surrender? The old war room beneath Geneva had grown into a sprawling command center that stretched for miles underground, connected to similar facilities in Beijing, Washington, Moscow, New Delhi, and a dozen other cities through communication lines that the Council's scanners could not detect. Admiral Chen Weilin stood before a massive holographic display showing Earth and the 500 alien ships that circled it like patient vultures, waiting for their prey to die. Here is what we know, he said to the assembled military leaders from every nation. Their ships are faster than ours, their weapons are more powerful than ours, and their shields can stop anything we have ever built. He paused and let that sink in before continuing. But they have weaknesses, and we have spent 30 years figuring out what those weaknesses are. The display changed to show detailed scans of the alien vessels, covered in notes and analysis from Earth's best scientists. Their shields are strong against energy weapons, but our tests suggest they are less effective against physical projectiles moving at extreme speeds. Our railgun platforms in the asteroid belt can accelerate metal slugs to nearly 1% of light speed, and we have thousands of them ready to fire. General Kowalski of the European Defense Force raised her hand with a question. Even if we can hurt them, how do we survive long enough to fight? One bombardment from that fleet could destroy every major city on the planet. Admiral Chun smiled grimly. That is where it gets interesting. We have studied every transmission from the Council, and we have noticed something important about how they think. He pulled up recordings of Velkrik's speeches and highlighted certain phrases. They talk about natural order and proper place in the galaxy and protection, like they truly believe they are doing us a favor. They do not see themselves as conquerors, but as teachers bringing civilization to primitive creatures. So? General Kowalski asked. So they will not start with full destruction. Admiral Chun explained. Because that would damage the resources they want to claim. They will begin with a demonstration of power. Something meant to terrify us into submission without destroying too much of value. He pointed to the main alien ship at the center of the formation. Our psychologists believe they will strike 1 or 2 cities, maybe 3, just enough to show us that resistance is pointless. And in that moment, when they expect us to break, we will show them what humanity is really made of. The display changed again to show Earth's hidden defenses, railgun platforms, disguised as mining operations, stealth ships hidden in the shadows of moons, ground-based laser arrays powerful enough to punch through atmosphere and strike targets in orbit. When they fire their first shot, we fire back with everything we have. Not to win in one battle, but to show them that this will not be easy. That every step they take toward Earth will cost them blood. Director Ase of the Intelligence Division stepped forward with her own addition to the briefing. There is something else you all need to understand about these aliens. They have never faced a species like us before. She displayed a graph showing the psychological profiles her team had built from analyzing every Council transmission in 12,000 years of galactic history. 612 species have faced this exact situation, and every single one of them surrendered. The Council has no concept of fighting against impossible odds because they have never seen anyone do it. She looked around the room at the faces of warriors from every nation on Earth. They think surrender is the natural response to overwhelming force. They cannot even imagine that we might choose to fight and die rather than kneel. That is our greatest weapon, Secretary General Okonkwo said as she entered the room. Not our railguns or our stealth ships, but our complete and total refusal to accept the outcome they have already decided for us. She walked to the center of the room and looked at the display showing the alien fleet. I have prepared our response to the Council's ultimatum, and I want all of you to hear it before I deliver it." She took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. "The people of Earth thank the Galactic Council for their offer of protection. We respectfully decline. We have protected ourselves for 300,000 years through fire, famine, and our own foolishness, and we do not require your assistance." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft but strong. "However, if the Council wishes to discuss trade, cultural exchange, or mutual defense treaties as equals, we would welcome the conversation." Admiral Chun laughed out loud, a sound that broke the tension in the room like a hammer through glass. "They are going to lose their minds," he said. "That is the point," Amara replied with a smile. "Because every species before us probably begged and pleaded and tried to negotiate for better terms. We are going to treat them like they are not even a serious threat." General Kowalski shook her head in amazement. "You want to make them angry on purpose?" "I want to make them confused," Amara corrected. "Because angry enemies make mistakes, and confused enemies make even bigger ones. They have never seen a species respond with confidence instead of fear, and it will throw off every calculation they have made." The day of the deadline arrived with the whole world watching, and Secretary General Okonkwo stood in the Stella contact chamber with representatives from every nation, every culture, every faith, and every walk of life arranged behind her in a show of unity that had never existed before in human history. High Arbiter Velcrix appeared on the screen with an expression of bored expectation. "Your time has ended. Little creatures, what is your answer?" Amara delivered her response exactly as she had practiced it, word for word, and she smiled warmly through every sentence when she finished. There was silence. Velcrix's S4 eyes blinked rapidly, and for the first time, his composure cracked just slightly. "I do not think you understand your situation," he said slowly, "so let me explain it more clearly. If you do not surrender, we will destroy your cities, enslave your population, and strip your planet of every resource that has value." "We understand perfectly," Amara replied, and her smile did not waver. "But perhaps you do not understand us. What is there to understand?" Velcrix snapped. "You are weak, primitive, and completely outmatched. Surrender is your only logical option." Amara leaned forward slightly, and something in her eyes made Velcrix actually lean back. "Let me tell you something about humanity, High Arbiter. We are the species that climbed out of the mud and looked at the stars and decided we would touch them someday. We are the species that survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed hundreds of millions of our own kind. We are the species that split the atom and then decided not to destroy ourselves with it." Her voice grew stronger with every word. "We have been fighting against impossible odds since we first learned to walk upright. And we are still here. Your council has existed for 12,000 years, but our stubbornness goes back 300,000. You threaten us with destruction? We have threatened ourselves with destruction a dozen times and survived anyway. You tell us to kneel? We do not even kneel to our own leaders, let alone foreign ones who arrive uninvited in our home." Velcrix tried to interrupt, but Amara was not finished. "So here is our answer, High Arbiter, and you can deliver it to your council with our compliments. Earth will not surrender today, or tomorrow, or ever. If you want our world, you will have to take it from us one bloody inch at a time." She smiled again, and this time it was not warm at all. "And we promise you this. It will cost you more than you can possibly imagine." The transmission ended, and Velcrix was left staring at a blank screen with an emotion he had never felt before in his 400 years of life. It took him several minutes to identify what it was. Fear. The first shots came at dawn over Europe, just as Admiral Chun had predicted. 3 beams of pure white energy lanced down from the Council fleet, each one carrying enough power to crack a continent, and they struck the cities of Marseilles, Munich, and Milan in a perfect triangle of destruction. 200,000 human beings died in the first 3 seconds of the war, and the council commanders waited for the screaming and begging to begin instead. They got something else entirely. Alarms blared across every ship in the alien fleet as sensors detected something impossible. Thousands of projectiles accelerating toward them from the asteroid belt at speeds that should not have been achievable by such a primitive species. The first railgun slug hit the Council cruiser Eternal Judgment at 9,000 kilometers per second, and the ship's shields flickered and died under the impact of raw kinetic force. The second slug punched straight through the hull and turned 3 decks into twisted metal and frozen corpses. What is happening? Velkrix screamed as his flagship shook from a near miss. How are they doing this? His tactical officer stared at the screens with disbelief painted across her gray features. They have weapons hidden throughout the asteroid belt. Thousands of them, all firing at once. Our shields are not designed to handle physical projectiles at these velocities. More impacts followed as railgun platforms that had been disguised as mining equipment for 30 years finally revealed their true purpose, each one hurling metal slugs at the alien fleet with mechanical precision. But that was not all. From the dark side of the moon, where no satellite had ever looked, a swarm of ships emerged like angry hornets defending their nest. They were small and fast and painted so black that they seemed like holes in the fabric of space itself. The stealth ships of the United Earth Defense Force had been humanity's greatest secret, built in underground factories by workers who had signed away their lives to keep the project hidden. And now they flew into battle with a single purpose: make the invaders bleed. Captain Sarah Okanjo led the first attack wing, her hands steady on the controls of her ship, despite the terror screaming in the back of her mind. "Remember your training," she said over the comm to her squadron. "Hit them fast, hit them hard, and get out before their big guns can track you. We are mosquitoes against elephants, but even elephants hate mosquitoes." Her ship dove toward a council destroyer, releasing a spread of missiles that had been designed specifically to overwhelm alien point defenses. And she watched with grim satisfaction as 3 of them got through and detonated. Against the enemy hull, the destroyer did not die, but it bled atmosphere and fire into the void all across the battle space. The same scene repeated itself. Small human ships darting in and out of the massive alien fleet, stinging and biting and refusing to stand still long enough to be swatted on Earth. The ground-based laser arrays joined the fight, reaching up from 6 continents to strike at the invaders with concentrated beams of light that made the council's shields glow and strain. Admiral Chun watched the battle unfold from his command center and allowed himself a moment of fierce pride. "They expected us to be sheep," he muttered, "and instead they found wolves." The first battle lasted 6 hours, and when it was over, the Council fleet had retreated to the edge of the solar system to regroup and repair their wounds. 73 alien ships had been destroyed or crippled, including 2 of their heavy cruisers that had been considered invincible. Humanity had lost 32 of its precious stealth ships, 4 orbital defense platforms, and the 3 cities that had been struck in the opening bombardment. But the most important thing humanity had lost was its fear. When the news of the battle reached Earth, something changed in the hearts of 8 billion people. The aliens could be hurt. They could be killed. They could be made to run away. And if they could run once, they could run again. Admiral Chun broadcast a message on all frequencies, knowing the aliens would hear it and hoping they understood. "You wanted our surrender. Come and take it." The Council commanders did not understand. They had analyzed the battle over and over, looking for explanations that made sense within their understanding of how species behaved. They should have surrendered after we destroyed those cities. the fleet's strategic officer reported to Volcrix. Every psychological model we have says that primitive species break when they see overwhelming force. But these humans, they fought harder after we attacked them. Show me their communications during the battle. Volcrix demanded. The officer pulled up recordings from human military channels, expecting to hear panic and terror. Instead, they heard something that would haunt the Council's nightmares for generations. Laughter human. Pilots laughed as they flew into certain death, cracking jokes and making references to things the translators could not explain. Human ground controllers cheered when enemy ships exploded. Human soldiers sang songs about defiance and victory, even as they watched their comrades die. They are insane. The strategic officer whispered, "No," Volcrix said slowly. "They are something worse than insane. They are enjoying this." He stared at the screen showing Earth. That small blue marble that had somehow produced the most terrifying creatures he had ever encountered. "Send a priority message to the Council homeworld," he ordered. "Tell them we need reinforcements, at least 5 times our current strength. And tell them to prepare for a longer campaign than anyone expected." He paused, searching for words to describe what he had witnessed. "Tell them these creatures do not fight like any species in galactic history. They fight like they have already decided to die and want to take as many enemies with them as possible. They fight like the outcome does not matter, only the fighting itself." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "We have made a terrible mistake. These creatures do not fight to survive. They fight because some broken part of their psychology makes them want to." While the Council fleet licked its wounds at the edge of the solar system, humanity used every moment to prepare for the next round. Factories that had been building consumer goods converted to military production overnight. Mining stations in the asteroid belt worked around the clock to harvest materials for new weapons. Every person who could hold a wrench or write code or stand a watch joined the war effort in whatever way they could. Secretary General Okonkwo visited the ruins of Marseille 3 days after the attack, walking through the ashes of what had once been a beautiful city. And she wept for the dead, but when the cameras found her, her face was dry and her voice was steady. 200,000 of our brothers and sisters died in this place, she said to the world. And the Council thinks this will make us afraid, that we will beg for mercy to prevent more death. She picked up a handful of ash and let it fall through her fingers. They do not understand us at all. Every person who died here has a family, has friends, has people who love them. And every one of those people is now dedicated to one single purpose, making sure this never happens again. She looked directly into the camera, and her eyes burned with something that the aliens had never seen before. "We do not surrender to those who murder our people. We do not forgive, and we do not forget. The Council wanted war, and now they have one. And it will not end until every last one of them is gone from our sky." Around the world, billions of humans watched and felt something ancient stir in their blood. Something that had carried their ancestors through countless trials and disasters. Something that the Council had never encountered in 12,000 years of easy conquests. Spite, pure, beautiful, unstoppable spite. The second fleet arrived 3 weeks later, 5 times larger than the first. And they found an Earth that had transformed itself into a fortress bristling with weapons and burning with rage. Admiral Chun looked at the approaching armada on his screens and smiled. "Round 2, he said. "Let us show them what we learned from round 1. And somewhere among the asteroids and moons and hidden bases of humanity's solar system, 10 million soldiers prepared to fight again, not because they thought they could win, but because losing was simply not an option they were willing to accept. The galaxy had never seen anything like it, and it was only the beginning. The second fleet hung in space like a wall of steel and fire. 2,500 ships ready to crush the insolent little world that had dared to fight. Back Admiral Chun knew the truth that he could not speak aloud to his troops. Humanity could not win this battle through force of arms. They had used every trick, every hidden weapon, every desperate gamble in the first engagement, and it had only been enough to bloody the enemy's nose against 5 times that force. Their military would shatter like glass, but Secretary General Okonkwo had taught him something important in the weeks since the first battle. There was more than one way to fight a war. Are the packages ready? Chun asked Director Osei as they watched the enemy fleet approach. Ready and waiting, she replied with a thin smile. Our hackers spent the last 3 weeks finding every backdoor and weakness in the Council's communication network. They think their systems are secure because no primitive species has ever tried to attack them digitally. They really do not learn, do they? They have never needed to learn. That is their weakness and our opportunity. The plan had been Okonkwo's idea, born from a late-night conversation about what made humans different from the species that had surrendered before them. They have superior technology and superior numbers, she had said. But we have something they cannot match: stories. Humanity has spent its entire existence telling stories about the little guy defeating the giant, the underdog winning against impossible odds, the Rebel Alliance destroying the Death Star. Those are just movies and books, Chun had pointed out. No, Okonkwo had replied. They are weapons. Every story like that teaches humans to believe that victory is possible, even when logic says it is not. Our culture is built on the idea that size and power do not determine who wins. She had smiled then, the same smile she had worn when refusing the Council's ultimatum. The Council species do not have stories like that because they have never needed them. They have always been the giants, never the underdogs. But what if we gave them our stories? What if we showed the entire galaxy what humans believe, what we have survived, who we really are? The virus was not designed to destroy anything. It was designed to share when the Second Fleet opened fire on Earth's outer defenses. Humanity's hackers released their creation into the Council's communication network, and within hours it had spread to every connected system in the known galaxy. Billions on thousands of worlds suddenly found their screens filled with human content. Movies about brave rebels fighting evil empires. Documentaries about humans surviving disasters that should have killed them all. Music that made listeners feel emotions they had never experienced. Art that celebrated the beauty of struggle and the glory of standing against the impossible. They saw humans marching into battle, singing songs about freedom. They saw humans rebuilding cities that had been destroyed by war and nature and time. They saw humans crying at funerals and then picking up weapons to avenge the dead. They saw humans laughing in the face of death because the alternative was crying, and they refused to give their enemies the satisfaction on a prison world called Nexus 7, where the wealthy species had been enslaved for 3,000 years. A guard found a group of prisoners watching a human film about a slave rebellion, and instead of punishing them, he sat down and watched with them on the trade hub of Merchant's Rest, where species from across the galaxy came to do business. Travelers crowded around screens showing human war footage and asked each other the same question. Why do they not surrender? Do they not understand they cannot win? And slowly, the answer spread. They understand perfectly. They simply do not care. The second battle for Earth lasted 3 days, and it was brutal beyond anything humanity had experienced before. Council fleet pushed through the outer defenses with overwhelming force, destroying railgun platforms and stealth ships and orbital stations with cold efficiency. For every alien vessel that fell, 10 human ships died, but something strange happened as the battle continued. 3 Council ships broke formation and stopped firing. Their commanders had spent the past weeks watching human content, and they found they could not stomach being part of what they now recognized as genocide. Then 30 ships followed, their crews refusing orders to continue the attack on a species they had grown to admire. Then 300 The Council fleet fell into chaos as ship after ship defected or simply stopped fighting. Their crews overwhelmed by a feeling they had never experienced before. Empathy for the enemy. High Arbiter Vel Crix screamed orders and threats, but his words fell on deaf ears. The virus had done its work too well, and his own people were turning against him in the midst of the chaos. Secretary General Okonkwo broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. Her face calm and her voice steady despite the explosions visible through the window. Behind her, people of the Galactic Council. You have been told that we are primitive, that we are dangerous, that we must be controlled for our own good and the good of the galaxy. She paused and let her words hang in the void. But you have seen the truth now. You have seen who we are and what we believe. We are not asking you to fight for us. We are asking you to fight for yourselves. The Council has kept you obedient through fear for 12,000 years, telling you that resistance is impossible, that the natural order cannot be changed, that you should accept your place and be grateful. Her eyes burned with conviction as she continued. We are living proof that those are lies. We are smaller than you, weaker than you, newer to space than almost everyone in the galaxy. And yet we are still fighting because we refuse to accept an order that says some beings are meant to rule and others are meant to serve. If we can resist, how can you? If we can fight, so can you. If we can look at impossible odds and smile, so can you. She leaned forward, and her next words were soft but somehow carried across light years. Join us, not as subjects of a new empire, but as equals in a new beginning. Stand with us, and together we will build a galaxy where no one has to kneel. The effect was immediate on 100 worlds. Populations that had been quiet for millennia suddenly rose up against their council overseers. Slave species broke their chains. Servitor races refused to follow orders. Even some of the council's core species began to question whether the old ways were worth preserving. The war that humanity had started was spreading, and it was no longer just about Earth while the military battle raged in space. Another battle was being won in hearts and minds across the galaxy. Humanity's stories, their art, their music, their unbreakable spirit had become a weapon more powerful than any railgun or laser director Osei reported to Admiral Chan with wonder in her voice. Our cultural virus has spread to over 4,000 systems. We are receiving messages of support from species we have never heard of. Some of them are offering to send ships to help us fight. Chan shook his head in amazement. We went into this war expecting to die. Now we might actually have a chance to live. More than that, Osei said. We might have a chance to change everything. The second battle ended not with a clear victory for either side, but with something that had never happened in galactic history, a stalemate born from mass defection and growing doubt. The Council fleet withdrew again, but this time they were not running from human weapons. They were running from human ideas, and those were far more dangerous. Vekrix sent a desperate message to the Council homeworld, but he was no longer sure anyone was listening. The humans have done something we never anticipated, he reported. They have made our own people question why we fight. They have made the galaxy see us as the villains of a story. And now everyone wants to be the heroes. He stared at the image of Earth on his screen. That small blue world that had somehow turned the entire galaxy upside down. We can still destroy them, he said. But I am no longer certain that destroying them would solve anything. Their ideas are already loose, and killing them might only make those ideas stronger. For the first time in his long life, High Arbiter Vel Crix did not know what to do in the ruins of Earth's cities. Among the wreckage of fallen ships and the graves of the dead, humanity began to realize that they were no longer fighting alone. The galaxy was waking up, and it was looking to Earth for guidance on what came next. 5 years had passed since the day the Galactic Council demanded Earth's surrender, and the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition The council itself had fractured into 1,000 pieces. Half of its member species had declared independence within the first year of the war. Inspired by humanity's example and supported by the growing network of rebel worlds that called themselves the Free Stellar Coalition Civil, wars burned across what had once been stable imperial territory. As oppressed populations rose against their masters and demanded the same thing, Earth had demanded the right to determine their own destiny. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo stood at the window of her office, watching the sun set over a city that had been rebuilt from the ashes of war. The scars were still visible, but so was the hope, and she thought that hope was winning. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "The prisoner is ready for you," her aide said. Amara nodded and made her way to the secure facility where one particular prisoner was being held pending trial for war crimes. High Arbiter Valkrix looked smaller than she remembered. His gray skin had lost its shifting quality and now hung loose and dull on his frame. His 4 eyes were dim and tired, and the arrogance that had once defined him was gone. "You asked to see me," Amara said as she sat across from him in the visitor's room, "and I decided to grant your request. What do you want?" Valkrix was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I need to understand." "Understand what?" "How?" he asked, and something in his voice cracked. "How did you do it?" "We had 5,000 years of experience in controlling young species. We had technology so far beyond yours that it should have been like stepping on insects. We had numbers and resources and every advantage that matters in war." He leaned forward, and Amara saw genuine confusion in his alien eyes. "You should have surrendered. Every calculation, every prediction, every model said you would surrender. Your species had only been in space for a few decades. You had never faced an enemy like us. You had no reason to believe you could win." Amara considered the question for a long time before answering. "You made a mistake in your calculations," she finally said. "The same mistake the Council has been making for 12,000 years. What mistake? You calculated our ships, our weapons, our technology, our resources. You measured everything that could be measured and concluded that we were no threat." She smiled slightly, and Valkrix flinched at the expression he had learned to fear. "But you never calculated our spite." "Spite?" Valkrix repeated the word as if it were a foreign language. "Our stubbornness. Our absolute, insane refusal to accept what everyone tells us is inevitable. You looked at us and saw a primitive species that should behave rationally. And you forgot that humans have never been rational when it comes to our freedom." She leaned forward, mirroring his posture. "We are the species that invented the concept of holding the line. We are the species that write songs about dying for a cause, even when the cause is hopeless. We are the species that built monuments to our greatest defeats because we believe there is honor in fighting even when you cannot win." "But that makes no sense," Valkrix protested. "Why would you fight when you cannot win? Why would you choose death over submission? Survival is the most basic instinct of any living creature." "For most creatures, yes," Amara agreed, "but humans are different. We discovered something a long time ago, something that your council never learned." "What?" "That there are things worse than death. That a life lived on your knees is not really living at all. That the only way to truly lose is to give up." She stood and walked to the window of the visitor's room, looking out at the sky where alien and human ships now flew together. "You asked for our surrender, and we gave you the only answer humans have ever really known. No, not because we thought we could win, but because surrender was simply not something we were capable of considering." Valkrix shook his head slowly. "We ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. "Yes, you did," Amara said. "And in all that time, you never encountered a species that would rather die than submit. That was your weakness. and you did not even know it existed. She turned back to face him. Every species you conquered was rational. They calculated the odds, saw that resistance was futile, and made the logical choice to surrender. But humans are not always rational. We are dreamers and fighters and stubborn fools who charge into impossible situations, because giving up feels worse than dying. And that is why we won. Not because we were stronger or smarter or more advanced, but because we wanted it more. Because every human on Earth was willing to burn for freedom. And that kind of fire cannot be calculated or predicted or controlled. Velkrix sat in silence for a long moment, processing her words. The galaxy will never be the same. He finally said, "No." Amara agreed. "It will not." And that is exactly what we intended. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back. "For what it is worth, I do not hate you. You were a product of your culture, just as we are products of ours. The difference is that your culture taught you to conquer, and ours taught us to resist. Perhaps in another life, under different circumstances, we could have been allies instead of enemies. But that is not the universe we live in, and you will face justice for what you did to my people." She opened the door and stepped through. "Goodbye, High Arbiter. I hope you find some peace before the end." The door closed behind her, and Velkrix was left alone with his thoughts and his defeat 2 centuries later. The Free Stella Coalition had become the dominant force in the galaxy, not through conquest or fear, but through something far more powerful. Choice. Every species in the coalition had joined voluntarily, drawn by humanity's strange philosophy that every being had worth, that freedom was sacred, and that even the smallest voice could shake the stars. The old council was a memory now, studied in history classes as an example of how empires built on oppression inevitably fall. Its former territories had transformed into a patchwork of independent worlds and federations, each one finding its own path forward. Humans had not become the rulers of this new galaxy. They had specifically refused that role, insisting that the coalition be governed by representatives of all its member species equally. But they had become something perhaps more important. They had become the example on the anniversary of First Contact, now celebrated across 1,000 worlds as Liberation Day. Billions of beings gathered to remember and celebrate, and they all raised a toast with a tradition that humans had shared with them. To spite, they said, grinning in whatever way their species could grin, and to those too stubborn to stay down on Earth. In a small memorial garden built where the city of Marseille had once stood, an old woman sat on a bench and watched the sunset. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo had retired long ago, her work done and her legacy secure. She was the most famous human in galactic history, the woman who had smiled in the face of annihilation and changed everything. A young girl, no more than 6 years old, and clearly not entirely human judging by her slightly blue skin and extra fingers, ran up to her with a flower in her hand. "Are you the lady from the stories?" the girl asked, "the one who told the mean aliens to go away?" Amara laughed, a warm sound that had not changed in all her years. "I suppose I am, though the real story is more complicated than that. My mommy says you saved the whole galaxy because you were not afraid." Amara shook her head gently. "I was very afraid, little one. Everyone was afraid. But being brave does not mean you are not afraid. It means you do what needs to be done even though you are afraid." She patted the bench beside her, and the girl sat down. "Can I tell you a secret? The real reason we won?" The girl nodded eagerly. "We won because we believed in each other. We won because when things looked darkest, we held hands and refused to let go. We won because being human means never accepting that the fight is over until you decide it is over." She looked up at the sky, where stars were beginning to appear. "And now, because of what we did, there are little girls like you on 1,000 worlds who will never have to know what it feels like to be conquered. There are species who will never have to kneel. There are dreams that will have room to grow. She smiled at the child. That is what humans do. We make the impossible possible, not because we are special, but because we are too stubborn to admit when something cannot be done. The girl looked up at the stars with wonder in her eyes. Will I be able to do impossible things too? Amara put her arm around the child and smiled. My dear, you already have the most important tool you need. You live in a galaxy where impossible things happen every day. All you have to do is believe that you can make them happen. She pointed at the brightest star in the sky. Someone looked at that light once and thought it was unreachable. Now your grandmother lives there. Never let anyone tell you what you cannot do. The girl grinned, a smile full of hope and determination that reminded Amara of herself at that age and somewhere in the cosmic void. The universe watched the strange little species that had changed everything and wondered what they would do next. But that was the beautiful secret of humanity. Even they did not know. They would just do it anyway. End.